everyone. Ted Hoyt, Veterans Remember. I'm happy to have Hank Allessio here, one of the founders of Veterans Remember and really the chief engineer and sometimes host of Veterans Remember here, a U.S. veteran. Welcome, Hank.
Thank you.
It's very nice to have you
Thanks
here.
for having me.
So we'd like to just ask you a little bit about yourself, your military background. So if we
Sure.
can kind of start from the beginning and tell us where you were born and what about your family.
That's
and
really the
things like-
beginning.
Yeah.
Well, born and raised in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, in a dear Italian conclave, kind of like here in town, Woodville is its own little conclave. And our family, some of them are still there. And we are a splinter group from a farm activity in town. And one of the things that's interesting to me, at least, is when I was a kid, a young teenager, everybody in Lakewood knew who I was because I would walk my baby beef steers around the neighborhood to give them exercise so they have a better appetite.
So were your parents from Pittsfield originally?
Yeah, all Pittsfield related. My father was born and raised in Pittsfield. My mother was born in Italy, and as a young girl, her father took his children back and forth between Italy and America so that none of his sons would get drafted into the military, but one of them did. And my sister, who is still with us, and I are very proud of our accomplishments. Our mother went to school for 5 years, and my father went to school for 9 years. So we're hardly from Harvard Graduate School. But they were very instrumental in getting us where we are.
And was your father also from Italian descent?
Oh, sure.
So that enclave in Pittsfield, or you said Lakewood?
Lakewood.
Was that an Italian enclave?
Yeah,
Was that primarily?
yeah, pretty much.
But also farm, you mentioned
Yeah.
the farm. So
We let a few others in.
non-farmers.
Yeah.
So that farm, were there any organizations that the farming community was part of?
As kids, we were very active in 4-H.
What is that? Is it-
Head, Heart, Hands, and Health. It's a youth group that helped people develop their farming activities. My sister, for a couple of years, was the county agent for the whole area. And she did very, very well.
And the county agent in the 4-H?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And were your parents farmers, or was your...
My father, yes. My mother, no.
And was she was a homemaker?
Yes, she came from some Alp.
Okay. And okay, so from Pittsfield, Lakewood, you then went where?
Well, I was in the public schools, graduated from Pittsfield High School in 1957, and from there went to college at WPI here in Worcester, and received an BS in mechanical engineering.
Okay. Did you do any sports at either WPI or at Pittsfield High School?
In high school, I was football and baseball. Baseball was more a wooden plank where I sat, but I did all right with football. At WPI, I played lacrosse, got a few letters.
Okay.
And that was part of my developing, because I was really a rube, and being able to get exposed to other people was very important to me. I didn't know it at the time.
So when you said you got letters in lacrosse, you'd compete against other colleges.
Oh, sure. Oh,
so
sure.
Did you travel quite a bit?
Oh, in the general area, we might have gone as far as Amherst to play and get beat by UMass.
Okay.
Or Southern New Hampshire or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what made you interested in the military?
Well, I was from an era where that's what you were supposed to do. Much like Hopkinton, when you look around the neighborhood, everyone who's of a certain age was in World War II. That's just the way it was. The same thing in Pittsfield and Lakewood. You look around, anyone who was of a certain age was there. And I had a cousin, second cousin, who was, we think, hit by friendly fire, and we lost him in the early spring of '45. An uncle in a combat engineer group, another uncle, a Marine. He was in the second Guam attack and Guadalcanal. A cousin who was in Vietnam, and he jumped out of helicopters and did what they did. Another cousin who was E6 in the Marines.
But was your father opposed to the military? His father had been.
Not opposed, but he would often say he was too young for the first war, too old for the second war. But the two uncles were close compadres of his.
And you say that one of the uncles was in the Second World War.
Three of them.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Three of them.
So you decided to join an ROTC program there at WPI?
Yes, at WPI.
And what was that? How did that work back in the 60s?
Well, we had actually a fairly big class because of the age we were in. I think now it's much harder to recruit young men or young women. And we had, I'm just guessing, 100 in the ROTC class. And we would march on the parade field Saturday mornings, and we'd have 1 or 2 hours of class during the week to learn about stuff. And then after graduation, we had our butter bars and first assignment.
Okay, and was the ROTC divided between, was it just Army ROTC or Air Force?
At WPI, it was just Army.
Just Army. So you joined the Army ROTC, and then you were commissioned in the Army?
Correct.
And where did you go from there?
Well, my first assignment was Okinawa, and I had to get an atlas out to know where I was going.
In what branch were you?
Signal Corps.
Okay.
So a classmate and I drove cross country to fly from Travis overseas.
Where is Travis? In California?
Northern California.
Okay.
Still operating airfield. And I experienced 3 legs of a 12-hour turboprop flight from California to Kadena Airfield in Okinawa. And I was scared. I mean, I was just, like I said earlier, I was a rube. And I ended up in Kadena at, I would guess, around midnight, because it was pitch dark outside, pitch dark. And I had the good fortune of having my company commander and his XO in the middle of the night greeting me. And so we went over, we probably had a Coke and a hot dog or something like that, but we just chatted to get to know each other. And one of them leaned over to me and said, don't unpack. I said, what are you talking about? I'm assigned to Okinawa. You're going to go to Vietnam. And I didn't know where Vietnam was, but that's where I was going. And after a couple of days of, just hanging around, I ended up in Tan Son Nhut, lived in Tent City for a week or 10 days.
And that's in Vietnam?
Vietnam,
Tan Son Nhut.
yeah. And then ended up northerly to Da Nang.
So, to back up, you're in Okinawa. Was the entire unit deploying to Vietnam, or?
No, well, that's interesting. Yes and no. We were in a grander operation of the 9th Logistical Command, and there was a whole bunch of operations. I mean, transportation, communication, mortars, everything. And while I was there, I didn't know this, but they were breaking up that organization and sending most of it to Karat, Thailand. But they assigned me to Da Nang before I could get into that movement. So yes, the whole group moved out to Thailand. I was over here very lonely in Da Nang.
So what was there in Da Nang?
Being Signal Corps and this is 1962, so being very early on in all the activities over there, there was a lot of helter-skelter. And one of the things that the military didn't have was good communications. Da Nang, you may or may not realize, was one of the 3 biggest airports in Vietnam. In fact, for a couple of years, and Rolling Thunder, are you familiar with that? They were the biggest airfield in the country. So they needed communication. So they set us in Da Nang to take all the information from that area and send it to Saigon.
So where was Da Nang physically? Was it north of Saigon? Was it in the north of the country?
It was during the conflict. South Vietnam was broken into 4 core groups, and Da Nang was in the northernmost one.
Okay.
But the oddity of it, the technology we had wasn't very good at all. I mean, we were working out of some, trucks with equipment in it.
Was it leftover
Yes.
Second World War and Korean War
Yeah.
equipment?
Yeah, actually, the story I like telling is when I ended up in Da Nang, I just had a piece of paper with an address on it. And I got out of the plane I was shipped over with, and the airfield, and I stress airfield, it wasn't an airport, had simply 2 Quonset huts full of holes in the roof. And they were all clearly left over from the French War. And you could fit 1 plane in each Quonset. So I got out with my AWOL bag, and the receiving room was a park bench outside of one of the Quonsets. So I went over and I sat down, and within moments, a Spec 4 came over and sat down next to me, and we were chatting. He was rotating back, and I was rotating in. And within a few moments, I began to wonder what was happening, because I smelled an awful lot of liquor. And I said, what kind of a place am I into here? So I'm sitting with this guy, and finally he got picked up and taken off, but stunk like heck. And so in time I got picked up, and I got to my then unit with my AWOL bag.
And what is that, by the way, an AWOL bag? What do you mean by
A
that?
gym bag.
Just a small, just
Yeah.
your necessities.
Yeah.
AWOL meaning absent without leave, like
Yeah,
if
but
you
that-
needed to
that-
run away,
Yeah.
like that they call it that.
So I got there, and the booze smell was still with me. What had happened is when I put my AWOL bag down, the bottle of Granddad that I had in there broke.
Oh, wow.
I was going to bring that to the CO, but it didn't work out. So
But you didn't get in trouble. Nobody was like, hey, what's that?
I mean, the poor E4 who left, he said, "Jeez, what do they got going?"
LT's got.
Yeah. So anyways, that's just a side.
So how many people were in Da Nang? How many Americans, I should say, obviously, were in Da Nang when you got there?
Yeah, that's hard to judge. In all of Vietnam at that time, there were single-digit thousands advisors. And most of them, oddly enough, I got assigned a BOQ in Okinawa, and a bunch of four-man BOQs. And most of the people living in the BOQs were very transient. They were special forces, lieutenants and captains and whatever, and they kept on rotating back to Vietnam, and there was some crazy detail. If you were away for 151 days, you had to go back to your starting point. So I lived with a whole bunch of Vietnam guys on Okinawa, and I would guess in Da Nang, 500. Da Nang is a fairly wide area, and off to the west are where the mountains and the heavy forests were. And these special forces guys spent their time up there looking for the bad guys. And the United Nations, I think, it might not have been the United Nations, they had a logo on their material with the clasped handshake, and that meant that the VC stole it from the good guys, and that meant that the Special Forces guys that were on the trail were hot after some VC. And
So, sorry, Hank, when you say that, was that the UN symbol from when the French were there?
I'm not sure.
Okay, but the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong were wearing that symbol?
Oh, no.
Okay, I didn't understand.
If they had a bag of rice,
Okay.
That
Oh,
would be-
yes, understood.
like Purina dog chow. Yeah.
But that would that aid would have the symbol, would have the UN symbol on it, and then would be stolen.
Yeah,
by,
it had to be stolen.
Right.
But the Special Forces guys that were in those mountains and forests knew they were on the trail.
when they would see that.
And so I'm down in the flatland with my communication rigs that aren't working. And when our unit was first sent over, they loaded us up with everything possibly needed, including C rations or K rations, and munitions. But once everything settled down, everyone realized we weren't going to be spending. My unit was going to be spending time in a foxhole. This Lieutenant Humble, still remember his name, got wind that these straight legs
You,
Yeah,
straight legs. Yeah.
we're over there with a whole bunch of K rations, and they're not using them because we were on per diem, and we went downtown to eat. And so he knocked on my door one day and offered me a deal. And the deal was he would give me the Springfield 03 that presumably they got from VC, and I would give him the K rations, which we weren't using.
So a Springfield rifle in exchange for the K rations.
Yeah.
So
And
what year was this? I just want to make sure the
62.
statute of limitations is
62.
Okay, so go ahead, please.
But actually, Paul enjoys the story of how I broke the 03 into 3 pieces, and on 3 different occasions sent one of the pieces home.
Because you weren't allowed,
Right.
you weren't allowed to send a weapon home.
Yeah, so when I did get home, my father was just delighted that he had reassembled it, and here's this, good-looking weapon.
And you reassembled it properly?
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh, yeah.
All right. So, so you're in Da Nang. You're part of a 500 American contingent and trying to do the communications for them.
There might have been 500 Americans in Da Nang, my guess, but I was simply. We had a compound, just cyclone fence, that abutted the airfield. Remember, the airfield had holy Quonset huts and park benches. That's where we were. But my compound was just a small area abutting the old Verall field. At that time, the aircraft using the field were 123s, 130s, and helicopters. There were no jets.
Yeah.
But actually, Paul Sear, who was a Hopkintonian, had 2 tiers in the Navy Seabees, where he went back and they put in a real fearful airstrip, and that's when it became the busiest airport in the country.
So busy, was it busy when you were there as well?
Oh, busy in a very different way.
Okay.
I mean, we were lucky to get a ride to Saigon. I was the Class A agent for salary. I used to go down to Saigon every month, but I'd be sitting on a canvas seat in a 123. That wasn't very, wasn't like TWA or anything.
Was it all American aircraft using that field, or was it also a South Vietnamese base?
I don't know that precisely, but it was certainly a mixture. Certainly a mixture.
Okay. So you're in Da Nang, communications officer. Did you have anyone working for you, or was it just you and the machines?
Oh no, we had a squad, not a platoon. We didn't have that many, but we had let's say a half a platoon. And we had a receiving site, we had a transmission site, and we had it so that we had 24/7 watchovers of the equipment. And as I say, it wasn't working very well, but we were prepared.
But in theory, you were the communications hub for the Da Nang airfield,
Yes.
communicating with Saigon.
And then as we were being transferred back to Okinawa, the Air Force was building real equipment. And if you may have seen pictures of these very big reflectors, they were arced, and that was their microwave line of sight between, from Da Nang to Pleiku to Dalat, all the way down to Saigon.
Okay.
And so that worked.
Yeah.
And so,
And
so they sent me home.
in the attempted communications, did you ever hear anything crazy that?
Yes. So I told you when we were sent over, we had everything we ever thought we need, including weaponry. And I got a radio communication from Major Fowler. And he said, we just intercepted some real, detailed messages
From the north, from
the area.
Okay.
And the Air Force unit that's over next to Marble Mountain, I'm making that up, was reporting that they were surrounded by the enemy. So get ready for anything. So we got all our gear out, and we were arguing who gets the carbine, who gets the 45, the M1, but we all ponied up waiting for something to happen. And as we were kind of sitting there wondering, we got another communication from Major Fowler, and he said, whoops, that was a miscommunication. The Air Force unit just moved in, and they were testing their systems.
Oh.
And it was bogus.
Don't get me started about the Air
Really?
Force, right? No. So you're at Da Nang, communications officer. Where'd you go from there?
Okay, well, when all that didn't happen happened, they sent me back to Okinawa, where when I got there, my unit had already been transferred to Korat, Thailand. So I was just sitting there with nothing to do. And I was very fortunate. The old man back in Okinawa took a liking to me, and I became the adjutant of the Signal Group, which was a pretty big organization. And you're familiar enough to realize that the adjutants typically aren't high rank, but they have power because they work directly for the old man. So I was a hot ticket, and it was great.
No. Any stories? You said that there were a lot of special forces guys that would rotate in and out of Okinawa.
Correct.
Did they have any crazy stories? Like, you see it in the movies, like, the CIA being in there and stuff.
The only thing, I wasn't, well, I guess I was buddy with one. I, being the adjutant, could write my own orders. And if I wanted to take a long weekend in Taipei, I just wrote the orders, and I went to the Air Base Space A. You familiar with the term?
Available.
So the next plane that gets out of here to Taipei, I want to be on it. So I did that all over the East, Asia. Forgot where. Oh yeah. So I was there one day with 2 or 3 other special forces guys doing the same thing I was, but I wasn't. I was a straight leg. And this one guy was going from Kadena to Korea to pick up his wife.
Oh, wow.
And he, as we were hanging around, he told a story about being in the bush and coming upon a site where there were American howitzers that were obviously inherited during the French Indochina War by the Viet Cong, but they were ours.
Right.
So
So they had leftover
Yes.
American weapons and would
well,
subsequently
and that's
use
where
them.
my Springfield '03 came from.
Yeah, and subsequently use. Oh, so that '03 was from it was a captured weapon.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh,
Oh,
yes.
okay, that's interesting. Okay, so you're in Okinawa, and you're the adjutant, abusing your power there. And what did you do from there? Was it,
Well, in time,
I'm just
my
jealous, by the
tour
way.
was up. I was only on active duty for 2 years
Okay.
in total. And I went back, and that's when I went to RPI and got my MS in management.
So you were at that point. You completely left the military, or were you in the?
Oh, I was in the inactive reserve.
Okay.
When I went back, for some reason I was living in Manhattan for a while, and I was assigned to an armory down in Greenwich Village, every month or something like that. It was a pain in the neck.
And so you go just occasionally, but you didn't. Did you end up retiring from the military? Or
Oh,
did you,
no, no,
Okay, so you
no,
didn't
no.
have the good years. It's like
I just waited for the string to run out.
okay, so you went to then RPI
Uh,
and got a degree. What type of degree did you get? there?
Management.
Management.
Yeah.
And then where did you go from there?
Took a job in Manhattan with the New York Telephone Company. And at the time, if I remember this correctly, the New York Telephone Company was the largest employer in New York State other than the government. But of course now everything is so different.
There was an old James Coburn movie where the bad guy was the phone company.
Oh,
the
really?
Computers. I'll show you that one after. So you then, after your time with the phone company, what did you do?
Well, I took a year off, not a vacation per se, but I saw that the telephone company wasn't going to be for me. So I went back home to Pittsfield, and there I met Judy Pizzini, and I became her husband.
Okay, and did you have children?
Oh, yeah, three kids, 2 girls and a boy,
And grandchildren?
6 grandchildren,
Oh wow.
3 and 3.
Okay.
And we've got marriages in the offing. I don't know how quick
Congratulations.
they're coming.
And how did you end up in Hopkinton?
Well, by that time, I was still in the consulting business, and I was doing okay, and enjoying an ability to bring in my own work. So both Judy and I agreed that Massachusetts was where we were born and raised, our relatives, our friends, our life experiences. And so we looked at a map and wanted to be anywhere within an hour of an airport. So we got this very, very good real estate agent, and he put us in this farmhouse that when we moved in, there was absolutely nothing around.
When was that?
1984, pretty sure, something like that.
And where is that? That's over by Lake Whitehall. Is that
Lake Whitehall.
okay?
Yeah, we could walk around our property at the time and not see another house. Now we walk around our property and not see another house.
Do you walk with or without the heifer?
Oh, actually, we had sheep for
Uh,
quite a while, but we won't have to get into that.
so I know we're running for time, but tell me how you ended up getting involved with the Veterans Breakfast and the Veterans Remember.
I guess I'm a red state guy, and Massachusetts isn't. And I did take part occasionally in veterans things. And at one of the November 11th veterans dinners, I was watching the dynamic, and there was a lot of people talking about, oh, do you know Ted Hoyt? He was in the Army, or do you know somebody about it? And they were so interested in older veterans that I just, let's give it a shot. And I put together a couple of maybe a dozen or 20 photographs of the veterans I knew, and went around town looking for someone to store them. And I won't mention who, but I went to a lot of places, and they said, oh, that's a good idea, but I came here and Jim Cousins fell over. He said, that's great. And he's been storing over 600 photographs of Hopkinton veterans. And as that was taking off, it seemed to be a good idea to do what we're doing now, Veterans Remember. And Dick Gooding fell over. He said, that's a great idea. And Dick, you may or may not know, is kind of a local hero. And he was a perfect, at the time, host of that. So we've got 30 some odd videos in storage.
Better than me? Is that?
Well, you're getting better.
Hank, I know we have to run,
Okay.
but thank you very much. And I will say thank you for the Veterans Breakfast as well
Oh,
that
the
you're hosting,
Veterans Breakfast.
which is how you wrote me in. Thank you for the Veterans Remember. Thank you for your service. And thank you
You're
for
welcome.
appearing here on Veterans Remember.
Thank you for having me.